Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. Today's video is about how to install an aluminum racing radiator on a 4th generation Ford Mustang GT. The radiator in this car started leaking a few days ago, and the thought of putting a radiator with plastic tanks back on it just didn't add up to me. I figured if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make an improvement. I'm not going to go through the trouble of doing all this work and putting the same low quality radiator back in. So if you have a 4th generation Ford Mustang GT and you want to know how to install an aluminum racing radiator in it, just keep on watching. Place a clean drain pan under the car on the passenger side and locate the drain plug right there. Loosen it up to drain the coolant. It's right here. If it feels too tight to loosen it up by hand, use a 3/4 inch wrench. Also, to make it faster, remove the cap. So go ahead and do that. Once the coolant is done draining, disconnect the upper radiator hose right here. Next, disconnect this hose right here that goes to the recovery tank, and disconnect the lower one. Remove these two nuts right here. They're 11mm, and this nut right here, they're all 11mm, and remove the recovery tank. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier, if you feel more comfortable disconnecting the negative battery cable when you're working on the car, then feel free to do so, because you're going to be disconnecting some electrical connectors shortly. So just like I said, if you want to disconnect the negative battery cable, that's better. And if you haven't even gotten started and you're watching this video just to learn how to do it, then go ahead and do it. In your case, your battery is going to be right here. The battery in this car has been relocated to the trunk, but it doesn't matter. Just go ahead and disconnect the negative. Once the recovery tank has been removed, place another clean pan underneath. Now on the driver's side, you can tell I still have the other one on the passenger side, but place another one on this side because there's going to be some coolant coming out when you disconnect the lower radiator hose right here. So go ahead and disconnect it. There's one thing I want to mention. The ABS unit has been bypassed in this car. All it has is this bypass plate, so it's disconnected, you can tell. Now in your car, if you feel that it's going to be on the way to be able to remove the fan, you may have to move it out of the way, just so you know. The next step is going to be disconnect this electrical connector for the fan. There's no need to disconnect that because it's just part of this assembly. And there's a bolt right here. And there's another one on the other side right here. So remove them. You will need an 8mm socket and a ratchet. Once the bolts are removed, then you just need to pull it straight up and remove the fan. Once the cooling fan has been removed, remove this screw right here, and either remove this clips right here or just pry gently on this plastic cover so you can remove it to gain access to the bolts that are fastening this clamps right here. So do that. So once the plastic cover has been removed, remove this bolt and remove the bracket, and remove the other side obviously and remove the bracket, and after that just pull it out. So here's the old radiator. You can tell that it was leaking right here on this tank. The gasket, the seal set obviously was bad, and just like I said earlier, putting another radiator with plastic tanks, not happening. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to improve it. And to make it even better, see the thickness of this radiator. It's just a 2-row. This one's a 4-row. So it's going to keep this car a lot cooler, and if I ended up keeping this car long enough, if I ever wanted to put a supercharger, then this radiator would definitely be more than capable of cooling it down, no matter how hard I drove it. So something kind of cool. So I'm going to start installing that one, and I'm not going to film that part because it's kind of redundant. The only thing that I would film is if I run into any issues. Other than that, I'll go ahead and install everything back in. After I'm done putting it in, I'll film it so you can see what it looks when it's all put together. One thing that I do want to mention is that this is a perfect opportunity to install a new recovery tank if you can afford it. Plus, it's also a good opportunity to replace your radiator hoses. I mean, you have one side of them disconnected, you got plenty of room. If you're just preparing for this job, just buy new radiator hoses, new recovery tank, new radiator. Cooling system will be pretty good. It's up to you. The hoses in this car were replaced before I bought it, so that's why I'm leaving them. The coolant recovery tank, I'm kind of taking a gamble. It'll be in plastic. Don't know how long it's going to last, but I'll keep an eye on it. I didn't want to make this expense all at once because the radiator wasn't cheap. So it's up to you. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and start installing it, and if I run into any issues, I'll film that. Otherwise, see you in a few. Here's what I meant about the thickness. See the skinny thing? And see the thickness of this one? Now this car is going to have a real radiator. One thing that I didn't mention earlier, because it didn't apply to this car, since it's a manual transmission, if your car has automatic, obviously you're going to have to disconnect the lines from the old radiator before you're able to remove it. Like I said, I didn't mention that part because this is a GT and it has a manual transmission. So here's how it looks once everything is installed back on. Haven't added the coolant yet, just showing you, just like I said I would. Everything went in perfect. If a person didn't know that this is an aftermarket racing radiator, it would be easy to assume that that's how it came from the factory. But as you and I know, from the factory came with a very flimsy 2-row with plastic tanks, which is totally unacceptable for a GT, in my opinion. As you were able to tell for yourself, the radiator went in very smoothly and it looks better than OEM. Got rid of this flimsy radiator. What's next is to fill it with coolant, and I'm going to use 50-50 mix for this car. In your case, depending on what kind of climate you live, you may have to use a different mix, so do a little research on that. And when you're filling it with coolant, there's going to be air in the system, obviously, so at that point you fill it up to the full mark. You put the cap on loose, don't need to tighten it up too much. You start your engine and let it warm up. Look at the temperature gauge, keep an eye on it. If it starts going past half, turn your vehicle off, let it cool down, and the air is going to bleed out. After that, then just add more coolant, start it again, and do this 2 or 3 times depending on how much air ended up in the system until all the air is out and it doesn't overheat anymore. The thermostat opens and closes correctly. Another thing that I could have mentioned is that this is another opportunity to replace the thermostat because you're draining all your coolant. However, if you're a subscriber to our channel, you already know that this car has a new thermostat. And because of that, I didn't need to put a new one. In your case, same thing as the hoses, put a new thermostat, new radiator hoses, new recovery tank, and why not, new heater hoses. That way all your cooling system is perfect. I'm not going to film adding the coolant and doing everything that I just showed you because it's really simple. So just make sure you do it correctly. And after that, take your vehicle for a test drive just to make sure everything is fine. And now you know how to install a racing radiator on a 4th generation Mustang GT. Thanks for watching. See you next time.